Welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, Episode 4.
You're listening to the Cash Car Convert Podcast with James Kinson.
Hello and welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, where cash cars are cool and auto debt is dangerous to your financial future. My name is James Kinson and I am the Cash Car Convert. Today we have with us Chris Basso. Chris is a public relations manager at CarFAX, and he's going to help us today educating us about how CarFAX can protect us and make us better consumers about the used cars that we buy. Chris, with that, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thanks, James. Good talking to you.
Thank you. Chris, even though we're here to talk about CarFAX today, I like to start off the interview by asking people about their first car, how they acquired it, and how it worked out for them.
Okay. We know that there's roughly 40 to 45 million cars that are purchased every year. For my first car, I was not one of them. The first car I ever had was given to me by my dad when I went off to college. It was the car that he had when I was in high school, and he knew that I would need one, being closer to home but still far enough away that I would need a car. So my first car was a hand-me-down. It was the 1989 Cutlass Calais S.
Gotcha.
Red. Called it the Red Baron.
All right. That's good. Well, getting it from the parents, at least you know what you're getting, right? So that worked out pretty well then.
I was hoping I did. I did not run a CarFAX report on it, unfortunately. But it turned out to be a really good car, so I was definitely fortunate.
Good. Well, listen, Chris, can you give us a little bit of your background? How long have you been at CarFAX, and how did you come to be there?
Sure. I've been with CarFAX, it's going on 10 years. As a public relations manager, every day I work with reporters and journalists on issues about used cars. I've always been a car fan, been able to identify pretty much the make and model of any vehicle going back to when I was a kid, and we'd ride in the car on long trips, vacations, and so forth. But I never really knew how much information and what was involved with used cars before I got to CarFAX. It's really just an eye-opening experience to see how much goes into the used car purchase, and unfortunately what a lot of people don't do when they're buying a used car that they really should. So I've been fortunate to be able to help educate people on the things that they need to do when buying a used car to protect themselves, because in reality, some of the things that I've seen in my 10 years at CarFAX are really scary in terms of accidents and damage and fraud that's out there that people get ripped off of day in and day out. And it's a great opportunity, and we appreciate you especially for helping people avoid those issues and purchase a safe, reliable used car.
Thank you for that. So building on that particular statement, what are some of the worst kinds of things that you've seen, and how have people gotten burned by those?
Well, most recently, CarFAX just completed a study on the incidence of odometer fraud. It's actually the first information that's been available on how much of a problem it is for 10 years. So what we found in our research was that right now there's over 1 million cars that have an odometer rollback that are on the road right now. And any one of those cars could be up for sale at any time. A lot of them through sites like Craigslist or on the side of the road by a private seller. In addition to that, there's about 200 new cases of odometer fraud that happen every year. So it's an old scam. People thought it went away with the advent of the digital odometer, but our research shows that it's unfortunately alive and well, and there's people getting ripped off from it on pretty much a daily basis. So it's something that you need to be aware of. It's a forgotten fraud, but it's certainly out there, and we encourage people to look at the mileage readings that are in a CarFAX report, look at the wear and tear on the car that they're buying, make sure it matches with the odometer reading before they lay down their hard-earned money.
That's a really good statement. And I can tell you that before the times of CarFAX, I did get burned that way myself one time. I tend not to buy from dealers for less expensive vehicles, and I found a car that an individual was selling and bought it, had all kinds of trouble with it. I replaced just about everything on that car at some point. And about 6 months after I bought it, I found out through an investigative journalist that the gentleman who sold it to me had actually been working for a dealer, and the miles had been rolled back. I never found out exactly how many miles it did have on it, but I know the odometer wasn't right. So I can tell you from firsthand experience, that's one of the reasons I'm a big believer in using systems like CarFAX.
Oh, we appreciate that. Thank you. And it really is, it's like I said before, it's eye-opening to see what people will do to cars. Odometer fraud is out there. It is everywhere. But one of the scariest thing I think I ever saw was vehicle that was in an accident. It was in a major accident, and the airbags deployed, and the car was taken to unfortunately an unscrupulous body shop. And rather than replacing the deployed airbags, they put in a 2x4 into the steering wheel where the airbag unit should have been. And knowing how much we rely on airbags to protect us when we're in an accident, that car was repaired and was resold. Unfortunately, it's a scam that most people don't find out about it until it's too late. But this particular person was very fortunate that it was discovered. Otherwise, if they were in another accident, they would have had a piece of wood in addition to everything else come flying at them in the event of another accident. So that's probably the scariest thing that I've ever seen happen with a used car.
Wow, that is quite scary. I've never been in an accident where airbags have deployed, but some of my relatives have been, and I know how scary that is in and of itself. So I can only imagine, if you were expecting an airbag and you got a 2x4, that's not exactly what you're looking for there.
No, not at all. But I don't want to frighten your audience. There are a lot of great used cars out there that people have taken care of, that don't have any issues like that. But, certainly examples like that just kind of raise eyebrows and make you be a little more cautious when you're buying a used car, and make sure you're taking the steps that are necessary, which includes a CarFAX report and an inspection by a mechanic to catch especially that type of issue with your airbag.
Yep, absolutely, and that's one of the things I do tell the people in my blog community and soon to be my podcast community here, that I do believe you have to do a lot of research, you have to do a lot of work online to eliminate some of the cars that might not be what you're looking for, and then you have to do a personal inspection, and then you also need to get a mechanic's inspection. So I absolutely agree. CarFAX is a key component of that, but definitely think at the end of the day, having a qualified mechanic look it over is a really great thing.
Yeah, especially if you're laying down your hard-earned money in one shot. If you're buying that car outright, like you encourage people to do, it's a big investment. It's probably the second biggest investment that we'll make in addition to buying a house. So it's worth researching and making sure what you're putting you and your family into. A CarFAX report, if you get one on your own, it costs you less than $40. But we encourage people to ask the seller, whether it be a private seller or a dealership, to provide that CarFAX report and give it to them for free. And then the pre-purchase inspection by a mechanic might run you $100, but it's a small amount of money to pay when you can consider all the things that can happen with the used car and the costs that can escalate from those issues. So we really encourage people to lay down a little extra money and do those things that can help prevent a lot of heartache and a lot of hassle in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree 100%. And I've certainly had my mechanic save me when he's inspected some vehicles that looked really good. And really the vehicles themselves there was nothing wrong with, but there were certain issues that had been repaired on that vehicle, and the repairs were quite expensive, and it wasn't something I wanted to potentially have happen to me. So I definitely agree with that. It's definitely worthwhile to have a mechanic take a look at the vehicle.
Right. Even if there's no issues with the car, just knowing what state the car is in, what the mechanic sees as potential costs for repairs upcoming, can really help you stretch your dollar and know what you're getting yourself into over the next couple of years and how much that car is going to cost you in terms of ownership costs.
Yeah, and right, so peace of mind, that's worth a lot. So you mentioned odometer rollbacks and major accidents. What other kinds of things can CarFAX protect us from?
really all the information that you want to know about a used car, you can find that in a CarFAX report. The number of owners that a car has had. We were talking before. The more owners a car has had, the more chances of getting that bad owner, the one who didn't take care of the car, there is. So certainly one owner, two owner cars could be more valuable to you based on the ownership, how well that car was taken care of. CarFAX has service information, whether the oil was changed regularly, the tire rotations, any repairs that needed to be done, that preventative maintenance, so you can determine how well the owner or owners took care of that car while they owned it. Flood damage we certainly see. We saw Hurricane Sandy a year ago. Those cars are still making their way onto the market, so flood damage information, any of the title brands like a Flood, Salvage, or Junk, those are things that you want to look for as well. So really that important information that you want to know about the car, ranging from damage to service to even liens, whether there was an unpaid lien on that vehicle, you can find out by getting a CarFAX report.
Wow, no, that's a new one. I'd never thought about that, an unpaid lien. Yeah, that would be one that could certainly come back to bite you if you weren't aware. And it's talking about the 1 and 2 owner type situation. It's been a while since I've used CarFAX because I haven't purchased a car in a few years now. But if I'm remembering correctly, the last time I did, CarFAX actually factored in terms of trying to help calculate the value of the vehicle, and they would say whether there was an additive for having fewer owners, if I'm remembering correctly.
What you're referring to is the CarFAX price adjustments. Many of us, when we're searching for a used car, we'll go to one of the retail book sites and look to see what the value of the car is that we're buying. Many of those pricing guides don't take into account the history of the vehicle. So CarFAX is helping buyers determine whether they're paying the right price for the car and what that car might be worth above or below the pricing guide that they're using based on the history that's been reported to us. So service history, ownership, mileage, everything that's reported to CarFAX is taken into account and put into that CarFAX price adjustment that you see on every CarFAX report that can help you determine how much or how much less that car might be worth in comparison to the pricing guide value that you're getting in your used car research.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely used. If you're looking at something that has fewer miles, or like you say, maybe more miles, but maybe it's been well maintained, I've definitely used that guide within CarFAX to help me adjust up and down when I'm looking at whether it's Kelley Blue Book or Edmunds.com or whomever it might be. So I really do like that.
And it really is a key tool to help you make sure you're getting the best value. A lot of us, we look for the lowest price car and think, oh, that's the right one for me.
Right.
But as you very well know, in buying a lot of used cars, the lowest price doesn't necessarily mean the best value. So you might pay a little bit more for a car, but look at what you're getting with that car. Look at the options that are available. Are the options that you want to have on the car, or can you do without them? Does the car have more miles, but was the oil changed based on the manufacturer's recommended service schedule? All that information needs to be taken into account, again, to determine the best value, not just the best price.
Absolutely right. Yeah, one of the things I really encourage my listeners to do is when they're searching for a car, that they try to find 1 or 2 owner cars, and that they look for somebody who has that pride of ownership. They've got that documentation, and they can't wait to show it to you. And as we discussed earlier, I think oftentimes those people will be the people who have the printed off CarFAX report ready to show to you. I know the last few vehicles I've sold, I certainly took advantage of that and had that ready, because I wanted people to be secure about the history on my vehicle. And that's one of the things that you don't get when you're buying at a dealership, and when you're buying at the low end in particular, that's one of the things I think is really missing from the buying experience. You can't really see or understand the history on a vehicle. If you're buying at a more higher end used car, you maybe have a certified pre-owned or something, and you get some protection there. But when you're buying the low end vehicles that the people I'm trying to help out who are in debt, I think they need those additional research tools, and this is just another one in the quiver there to help them make sure they're making the right decision. And again, I agree with you that if you're buying from individual, they should be providing the CarFAX report for sure.
Yeah, the more information that the seller is willing to give you up front, the CarFAX report, service records, any documentation they have of the vehicle, it all gets factored into that pride of ownership. This is probably somebody that I want to buy from versus the person who's going to be a little shifty, a little shady in giving me the information that I'm asking for, even just the vehicle identification number for the car. If they're unwilling to let you get that to run a CarFAX report, or unable to answer the questions that you have about their ownership and how well they take care of the car, find somebody that's going to give you that information up front and wants to sell you that vehicle because they took care of it.
Yeah, I didn't coin this phrase, but a friend of mine did, and he said it seems like the deal of a lifetime in cars comes along every couple of weeks. So, don't get hung up over one vehicle too much.
Absolutely right. Buy with your head and not with your heart.
Yep, absolutely. So remembering that my audience is I'm trying to help them look for cars under $5,000, and these are folks that don't have a lot of margin in their life right now. Are there any other tips that you would give them, in particular, things to look for, either in the CarFAX reports or, when they're inspecting a vehicle themselves or anything like that? I know you like you said, you speak to a lot of reporters. You have a lot of interaction with the auto community, and just like to get your feedback on that. Sure.
I think the key in buying those types of vehicles is just making sure you know what you're getting. The proper research is really your best protection. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure when you're buying a used car, especially a lower priced used car in the $5,000 or less price range. Unfortunately, some used cars have inherent problems, and we try to do our best to alert people to those problems. Like we talked about, odometer fraud, airbag fraud, even cars that have been in accidents. A car that's been in an accident isn't necessarily a bad car. Knowing that it's been in an accident, whether you find out through a CarFAX report or you're from the seller themselves by being upfront with you, is one thing. But understanding if the car was properly repaired is just as important as knowing the car was in an accident. Oftentimes we see people writing off cars that were in an accident just because it was in an accident, but they really can be some of the best values that are out there, because the sellers that know the car was in an accident and are willing to tell you about it by providing a CarFAX report, for one, they're going to take that into account and they're going to lower the price for it. But you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can. Take it to a mechanic, look it over yourself, take the car on a long test drive on city roads, on the highway, to look for any issues. But understand that the car was well repaired and repaired within the manufacturer's specifications, to know that you're getting yourself a good deal. And I think that's the number one key. About 1 in 5 cars on the road has been in an accident. So chances are when you're looking for a used car, you're going to come across one or more of them. But don't discount them. Just make sure you know that it's been repaired properly, and it could be a great car for you for years to come. Yep, absolutely right. And I've certainly seen that myself. It's one thing, like you say, to see in the CarFAX report that it's been in an accident. But if you can talk to the seller and they have the documentation on the repair, then you can look at that, have your mechanic look at the vehicle, and you can make an informed decision, which is really all I'm asking people to do when they do their research and before they buy a car, is to use their head, be intentional about their money and their car decisions. And I think the CarFAX report pointing out that a car's been in an accident isn't necessarily a showstopper, but you have to do a little bit more due diligence at that point, because like you say, that car's probably been discounted a bit because it's been in an accident, and therefore people, if they disclose that, then they realize that it's not going to be as valuable to somebody as one that's never been in an accident. Absolutely right, and that's a great thing to consider. When you buy that car, eventually you're going to get rid of it, and you want to make sure that you're also maximizing your dollar on return when it comes to selling that vehicle, and collecting that information, keeping your service records. There's a service that we offer called My CarFAX, which is absolutely free for any car owner, that keeps track of the service history on your vehicle, tells you when your next service is due. Keeping all of that information and providing all that information to your prospective buyer, you really can put more money in your pocket and maximize your return when it comes to selling that car. So don't only take into account what you're buying, but know what you're eventually going to have to sell as well. Yeah, Chris, I'm really glad you mentioned that. That was not something I was aware of, and
I do work hard to maintain my vehicles, make sure that I keep them up to speed and get the right maintenance work done. And and I do have the paperwork handy for people, but it'd be nice if there was something like this, my CarFAX, that would help me with that. I think that's great, so I'll definitely be checking into that myself.
I appreciate it, James. It's an app that's available for your iPhone or your Android, or you can just do it online at mycarfax.com. Again, it's absolutely free. It helps you keep track of the service history. It helps keep you on the manufacturer's maintenance schedule for your oil changes and any preventive maintenance that needs to be done. And it's a great tool to help keep your car performing as it should, keeping up the safety of it. And again, when it comes time to sell it, maximizing the dollar that you get on the sale of it.
Yeah, so for all of you listening out there, that's a really great point. When you buy a used car, and again, especially one that might be under that $5,000 range, how well it's going to work for you going forward. Once you've done your due diligence and you've screened your potential sellers and you've had your mechanic look at the vehicle and you make that purchase, it's only going to run well as long as you maintain it. And so, as Chris is saying here, working with manufacturer scheduling can really make a big difference. And I think if you compare that to the average car payment, which is $464 a month right now for a new car, I think you can more than pay for the maintenance on a vehicle and have it make good financial sense for you. So,
and if I could interject one other thing, James, on that, we were bombarded with so much information about how often we're supposed to change our oil and rotate our tires. You see all different mileage intervals, the typical every 3 months or 3,000 miles a lot of us go by, but that's not necessarily the case. It can differ based on the year, make, model car that you have. Some manufacturers recommend an oil change every 7,500 miles, some every 5,000 miles. So knowing what the manufacturer recommends and sticking to that schedule can actually help save you money in terms of cost of ownership. If you're changing the oil too often, if you're following the 3,000 miles, then you might be spending an extra $50 to $100 a year because you're doing it too often. And if you're not doing it enough, then you may be doing some major damage to your engine and costing you a lot more money in repairs. So sticking to that manufacturer's maintenance schedule and signing up for my CarFAX to get those alerts to know when it's done can really help save you money in the long run on the maintenance costs for that car.
That's a really great point. Yeah, because I am one of those people who does tend to do it as close as I can to 3,000. I'll let it go over a little, but because I know that most of the time there is that differentiation, and since I don't know the answer to it, I just kind of err on the side of conservatism there. So that's a really good point, and I may be spending money that I don't need to spend to keep that 3,000 mile schedule. So that's a great point. I'll definitely be checking into that as well for my truck.
Every dollar counts, right, James?
It does indeed. It does indeed, and especially for folks who are trying to dig their way out of debt. Anything that can help give them a bigger shovel to dig out would be greatly appreciated, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So I think you've answered most of the questions that I had off the top of my head, and even some that I hadn't thought to ask. Anything else out there that you can think of that you would want to tell my listeners about CarFAX and again, the used buying process?
Sure. Well, we talked a lot about the scams and how the CarFAX report can help you avoid those scams and purchase a safe, reliable, and well-maintained used car. But for your listeners, I do want to mention on those scams, CarFAX provides a lot of information that's available for free. We had talked about odometer fraud. We actually provide a free resource for people to check for odometer fraud. So if you're buying a used car and you want to make sure that the odometer hasn't been rolled back, you can go to carfax.com/ODO and we'll tell you for free if we identify a potential rollback for that car. If you're worried about flood damage, we provide a free check for flood damage at flood.carfax.com. Another issue that we actually didn't touch on, which is open recalls. If the car you're buying was recalled, chances are it wasn't fixed. And we've seen in the news some major stories about vehicle recalls and the consequences that can happen if that recalled part fails without you knowing. The recall information that's reported to us from manufacturers is also available in the CarFAX report, but also available for free at recall.carfax.com. So many of the major issues that we've talked about, there is a free check to look for those specific issues and scams. at various CarFAX sites. Come to our website, CarFAX.com. You can find information on used car buying, on these scams, and those free check sites out there available for you.
That's fantastic. And again, those are resources I was unaware of, so I appreciate you bringing those to light for myself and the audience. And those are all, like you said, those are things that everybody should be checking on for sure, because like you said, some of the recalls, there's some pretty big recalls, and a lot of people don't go to the effort to take their cars in. It's a hassle, and if your car's running okay, you think, oh, why bother, right? So
or it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to affect my vehicle. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But there were 2.1 million used cars that were for sale online last year that had an unfixed safety recall. And, you don't want to take chances with those cars. Knowing it has a recall is one thing, but taking the next step and either you taking it to get it fixed or having the seller get it fixed before you buy it is really key in protecting you and your family from potential disaster.
That's really good. Great point. That's wonderful. Well, wow. Like I said, you answered all my questions plus, so I really think this has been a great interview. I really appreciate your time. I'm going to link up to these websites that you referenced here in the show notes, so people will be able to find those and link back to both the free and paid resources that are available on CarFAX.com. And Chris, if somebody wants to reach out to you, is there how can they best reach you?
Well, there's a couple ways to reach us. If you have any questions for CarFAX in general about the car you're buying or the car you just bought, you can go to our help center at carfax.com/help and send us an email with your issue or concern, and we'll be happy to get back to you. I also encourage people to tell us their used car buying story. We want to hear how CarFAX helped you buy a great used car. We want to help you hear how we helped you avoid a problem or helped you identify a problem with the car you just bought, unfortunately. So you can email us at carfaxstories@carfax.com. Tell us your story, and we'd love to hear what you have to say on your used car buying experience.
Perfect. All right. Well, again, I've really enjoyed the interview. I've learned some additional details myself about what CarFAX can do. I had a sneaking suspicion I wasn't using it as fully as I could have, and sure enough, I was right. So it's nice to learn along with the listeners sometimes.
Well, we love to hear that, James, and again, we appreciate the work that you're doing to help your listeners make sure they're getting a safe, reliable used car. It's a huge deal for us. It's what we do, and appreciate people like you working to help others.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Chris, I appreciate you being on. With that, I'm going to turn to the listeners now and ask them to go to cashcarconvert.com, and they can check out the show notes for this particular episode. And I'm also going to ask them to go out to iTunes, and if they would, go out and rate the podcast and leave some comments. Let me know what you like or don't like about the show, what can be tweaked this way or that. The ratings and reviews help us to get noticed in iTunes. And that's something that I want to do. I think this is something that can help a lot of people, this topic of cash cars, and I want to try to help people, dump auto debt and buy a cash car and start taking care of their own family instead of worrying about paying for somebody else's. So with that, everybody, I appreciate you listening, and Chris, thank you again so much for your time.
Thanks, James, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I learned a lot in that interview, and I hope you did as well, and I hope that you can feel better about buying a used car, knowing that there's a service out there that's going to help you understand what you're buying a little more completely. Whether it's having concern about rollback odometers, or whether you're concerned about a car having been in an accident or not, whether it's got a salvage title. There's just so many ways that CarFAX can help. And some of those ways are free, right? So there's the recall report, which, again, is something that I hadn't considered, and I think that's a really great offering that they have, and that's at no charge. The odometer report is also a free service that they have, and those links will all be in the show notes at cashcarconvert.com/004. Again, cashcarconvert.com/004. So those were, my major takeaways here were that CarFAX does more than I thought they did, and I bet they do more than you thought as well. So I think we can be better informed consumers utilizing a service like this, making sure that the people we buy from are utilizing this service and providing those reports to us. But I will say, even if you have to buy that report yourself, I think it's going to be worth it. Obviously, you would want to do research on your vehicle and make sure that it was worth spending the money to kind of have that insurance up front. But, I've certainly done that myself, where I've bought the report before I bought the vehicle, just to make sure that I had all the information that I could available to me and that I could make a good buying decision. With that, I'm going to wrap this episode up. And I'm going to ask if you think this podcast is providing a service, the education and the inspiration that we're providing is something that you think is valuable to the community, please go out to iTunes and subscribe to the Cash Car Convert podcast. That's really going to help us get noticed. And then I'm going to ask you to do another thing, and that is leave a rating and review. Again, I'm looking for honest reviews and ratings. But the more 5-star reviews we have, the higher we're going to go up in the rankings within iTunes, and the easier it will be for people to find us. So if you think we're doing something important here, please go out there and support the show by getting a subscription to the show and then leaving a rating and review. Thank you. I look forward to creating a new podcast for you next week.